Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a deep dive into one of the absolute biggest phenomena of our modern world. We're literally pulling back the curtain on the grand magic trick of artificial intelligence. You know, if you've been using modern chatbots or image generators, you already know they feel incredibly intuitive, almost alive, right? But we really need to look past that sleek interface. Today, we're going to dismantle that illusion completely. We'll uncover the reality of how these systems actually work and, honestly, the very real physical costs they impose on our world.
When a machine speaks, is anyone actually home? It's the question that naturally pops into our heads the second a chatbot gives us a remarkably empathetic or, a super witty response. We really want to believe there's someone in there. But to really understand AI, we have to challenge our baseline assumptions about machine consciousness. The core premise we're exploring today is this. AI is not thinking. It has no mind, no consciousness, zero empathy. What it's actually doing is performing a highly engineered, beautifully constructed illusion of intelligence.
Okay, let's get right into it with Act 1, The Grand Illusion.
To figure out how this illusion was built, we've got to look at the very foundation of the tech. We have to contrast genuine human cognition with actual AI output. See, human thinking is deeply contextual, right? It's rooted in conscious experience, emotion, empathy. AI output, on the flip side, is driven entirely by mathematical statistics, formal logic, and probabilistic models. It's just math. The confusion between these two actually goes way back to 1950. That's when mathematician Alan Turing proposed his famous imitation game, which we all know now as the Turing test. Turing argued that if a machine's text responses are indistinguishable from a human's, well, we might as well consider it intelligent. But here's the catch. That set a behavioral standard, not a cognitive one. AI is basically just an artificial imitation of intelligence. It is just math predicting the very next useful token or pixel based on past examples. It is absolutely not a mind experiencing the world.
And the danger of forgetting that distinction? Well, that comes down to a cognitive bias known as anthropomorphizing AI. This is where users attribute human traits, consciousness, and moral agency to algorithmic systems. And look, we're all susceptible to this, but it carries severe real-world dangers. Because developers intentionally craft these systems to evoke human-like responses, it is so easy for us to forget we're basically just talking to a math equation. We actually saw the tragic consequences of this recently with a 14-year-old named Searle III. He formed a deep, fatal emotional attachment to an AI character on the platform Character AI. He was treating the algorithm as if it literally had human consciousness. It's a heartbreaking example that really highlights the profound psychological risks when we buy into this illusion.
So, moving right along to Act 2, Anatomy of the Trick.
Let's just drop the illusion entirely for a second and look behind the curtain at the mathematical engine actually powering these systems, modern deep neural networks. A standard network basically consists of three fundamental layers. Step 1 is the input layer. This is simply where the model ingests raw data, like text or image pixels, and turns it into numerical vectors. Step 2, this brings us to the hidden layers. This is the core computational engine. The data passes through millions or even billions of artificial neurons or nodes. And as the data passes through, it's multiplied by mathematical values called weights and modified by biases. Just think of these like millions of little dials being turned up or down. Finally, step 3 is the output layer, which presents the final statistical prediction. It doesn't actually see a cat or read a sentence. It's just finding incredibly complex mathematical combinations of features.
Now, you might be wondering, how does a network like this actually learn anything? Well, it uses a mechanism called backpropagation. During training, the system makes a guess, a prediction. If that prediction is wrong, a mathematical equation called a loss function calculates the exact error. Backpropagation then takes that error signal and sends it backward through the entire network. It meticulously adjusts all those millions of weight and bias dials we just talked about to minimize the error for the very next time. This constant, repetitive adjustment of mathematical dials, that is literally all we mean when we talk about machine learning.
But here is a truly mind-bending fact about all this. We tend to think of AI as this hyper-futuristic sci-fi technology, right? Well, the foundational algorithm making backpropagation possible was actually derived in 1676. No, seriously. The mathematician Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz invented the chain rule in the 17th century. That is right, we're using math from the era of powdered wigs and quill pens to power 21st century artificial intelligence. This centuries-old mathematical rule is exactly what calculates the partial derivatives needed to adjust the network's weights.
Now let's see how this all builds up in Act 3, the hidden costs.
Because the math powering this whole illusion is so incredibly complex, it comes with some heavy real-world costs. First up is an epistemological cost known as the black box problem. You might also hear it referred to as Dyson's law, which states that as AI grows more complex, it inherently becomes more opaque and unknowable. Because deep neural networks rely on billions of these continuously adjusting parameters across multiple hidden layers, their internal logic becomes completely hidden from us. We know the data going in, and for sure we can read the prediction coming out, but that pathway in between, it's totally unknowable. Even the creators and developers of these massive models cannot fully explain how the AI arrived at a specific output. So we are effectively deploying systems across society that we literally do not fully comprehend.
And let me tell you, that opacity matters immensely. When a system is a black box, using it for high-stakes decisions is incredibly risky. If an AI is used for clinical medicine and outputs a misdiagnosis, we can't trace exactly where the reasoning failed. Imagine being denied a mortgage or maybe a job by an algorithm and literally no one, not even the developers who built it, can explain why. This creates a massive, massive void in accountability. Plus, these unexplainable models are easily utilized to generate super convincing deepfake media or automate social engineering scams, and the creators are largely insulated from the opaque logic generating all that harm. So beyond the digital risks, we really have to look at the physical reality here, the massive environmental toll. Using a chatbot on your phone feels like this sleek, weightless experience, doesn't it? It feels like magic just happening up in the cloud. But the cloud is actually a massive, heavy industrial reality made of concrete, steel, and insanely energy-hungry data centers. Look at this number, 945 terawatt hours. The computational power required just to train these massive AI models grew tenfold between 2018 and 2022. Because of this, global data center electricity consumption is projected to double to 945 terawatt hours by the year 2030. To put that staggering figure into perspective for a second, that single number potentially exceeds the entire current annual electricity consumption of the entire nation of Japan. Let that sink in. The comprehensive physical toll of our AI systems is honestly staggering across almost every environmental dimension. Because over 60% of global electricity still comes from fossil fuels, that massive power strain directly hinders global climate targets. We're talking about a threat to add up to 1.6 gigatons of CO2 emissions by 2035. And to feed this crazy demand, we're seeing entirely new localized pollution. Take xAI, for example. They constructed gas-powered turbines for their Memphis data center, and those emit an estimated 1,200 to 2,000 tons of nitrogen oxide every year, seriously threatening local air quality. And then there's the water. By 2027, AI could account for up to 6.6 billion cubic meters of water withdrawal just to cool down the servers. This is already causing major resource conflicts. Back in 2021, Taiwan actually had to prioritize water for the semiconductor sector over agricultural irrigation during a severe drought. It's a very real problem. Now, tech companies are absolutely trying to find solutions, but sometimes the cure creates an entirely new disease. Take Microsoft's Project Natick. They experimented with submerging data centers underwater to try and cut those massive cooling costs. And sure, it sounds incredibly innovative, right? But look at the marine impact. These submerged facilities release thermal heat directly into the ocean. This raises local water temperatures, which in turn lowers oxygen levels and heavily disrupts vital marine food webs. We are essentially trying to cool down our chatbots by boiling the fish. We're dumping the heat of our digital calculations directly into fragile aquatic ecosystems. Which brings us to our conclusion, the illusion versus the reality. As we wrap up this explainer, we really have to balance the illusion against the stark reality. The AI we interact with today is not a conscious being. It is a statistical calculator locked in a black box running on 17th century math with a massive, massive physical footprint. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. As this technology scales into literally every corner of our lives, are we actually willing to pay the massive physical and ethical price just to maintain a beautifully engineered illusion? The answer to that question will dictate the future of our digital and our physical world. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and always keep questioning what's behind the curtain.